Afternoon. This is viewers' comments number 4. Last week's viewers' comments went on quite a lot, so I've actually cut it up in 2, so here's the rest of the responses. Sorry to keep you waiting, but here we go. Question from Roboticus Music on the Firewire upgrading to PCIe video. What is the ideal setup? RME model hooked up to this PCI card? Really like RME, but what are the thoughts about the future of USB 3X, Thunderbolt 1, 2, 3? Right, so for me, USB is not the way to go for audio at all. USB 2, nope. USB 3 is no better for audio. It's got more bandwidth, but it's not got more latency because of the way that it works. And in essence, it's not literal, but pretty much down to the connection protocol. Thunderbolt is PCIe. PCI Express is Thunderbolt. There's a little more to it. The Thunderbolt connection you can send power down it. And this is where it gets confusing, because USB-C, which is not USB, it's just the connector type, can have USB on it, it can have DisplayPort on it, it can have Thunderbolt on it, it can have all of them at once on it. That depends entirely on what the manufacturer has put behind it, which makes it really difficult trying to explain this to people because it's not clear-cut enough. People see a USB-C socket on a computer and they assume it's Thunderbolt. And then they try and plug a Thunderbolt interface in and get upset when it doesn't work. And this is a real pain, because then they end up sending it back and the audio interface manufacturer goes, "It's a Thunderbolt interface and you didn't have Thunderbolt. Why are you doing this?" And as much as it's supposed to be easy having one connector type for everything, it makes it more difficult. Now, going back to Thunderbolt versus PCI Express, if you look at those small PCI Express slots, that's a PCIe times 1 slot, which means it's got 1 data lane. Now, Thunderbolt 1 has 1 data lane, so they're almost identical. Now, the big, long PCI Express connectors are 16 data lanes, or sometimes 8 if you look closely, and then there's actually no gold pins for the second half of it. The way that they design them is that you can put a times 1 card in an 8 slot, a 4 slot, a 16 slot, so that there's plenty of space. It means that it's kind of modular, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's kind of the longer the card, the more lanes. And so that works fine. Thunderbolt 2 has 2 lanes, and Thunderbolt 3 has 4 lanes, if I remember rightly, which is still not as much as like a full high-end graphics card would use. But then compared to audio, graphics cards use tons of data. They make audio look stupidly small in comparison. Thing with Thunderbolt and PCI Express for audio is it gets the audio straight out there as fast as it can, so that it's in the audio interface and back to the computer in almost no time at all. Anyway, moving on. Ooh, here's an interesting question on the Reaper 101. Why are you sending the bass channel to another channel with reverb? Why don't you just add the reverb plugin on the bass track itself? Isn't that easier? This is something that I should probably talk about in a video, is the crucial difference between inserts and sends. Technically speaking, putting a reverb on the same channel as your audio is easier. Sure, it's easier, but it's not easier because of the way that an engineer tends to think about them. If I put a reverb on a channel like, say, bass or guitar or a vocal, it then can't be used with anything else. This locks it down, puts it in one place, and means you have to have more and more and more and more of these reverbs or delays or whatever it is across the rest of the mix. This makes it messy, It means that it's hard to deal with. It means if you change one, it doesn't change all the others. What you want to do, really, is use a separate track with that reverb on it and then send audio to it. That's called a send. And when you do it that way, it's a little more work to set up, but it doesn't take very long at all. The reason for that is then you can send other channels to the same reverb. And it then becomes its own thing where you can put an EQ before the reverb to take all the low end out, for instance. Maybe do that after the reverb if that works better for you. And you can compress the reverb, you can distort it. You can do that on its own away from your main audio. And that makes life so much easier because then, if I'm working on a mix, I might have 2 or 3 reverbs and a delay. And they're all at the end of the project. They're just the last tracks. And I can see them at the end. Which means that if I want to have more of a reverb or less, or send a track a bit more reverb for the snare, a bit less for the bass, I can literally grab the send knobs and just go yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And if I decide to change the reverb sound entirely, I change it once on one channel and it's done. And that makes life so much easier and it's so much quicker to work with. And it's also the way that, generally speaking, traditionally analog engineers would do it because it's economical. You don't need to buy 20 reverb units when you can have one. And it's not the same in terms of money, but it is the same in terms of CPU usage now. That it makes your life easy when you can have a 100 channel mix and only have a few reverbs at the end so your processor's not going crazy. Here's an amusing one on the Firewire video. Hi Hop Pole Guy. Hi. Do you know about Sound Blaster Audigy Breakout Box? I'm just going to stop there. Don't use an Audigy or anything like that. They are so far out of date that they will cause you nothing but driver issues, pops and crackles. No. On one of our desks upstairs, actually, hold on. This is an Audigy 2 ZS, and this is the card that came with it, and you connect them with a ribbon connector. This has been in the studio since before I had a studio. This has been around in this building and belongs to my friend Liam since about 2005. And we stopped using it before the recording studio even came into existence because it's that unreliable with anything in any kind of modern software that we keep it for nostalgia purposes because it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I remember that, it was awful, oh. So, just do yourself a favour and don't. Something on the speaker burn-in video. You were able to hear the difference in the test at the end. Any ideas how to do this if I don't have a pink noise generator? You do have a pink noise generator. The power was inside you all along. The pink noise, you can find pink noise anywhere. You can download a sample off the internet. You can find it all sorts of places. What I was doing with for the burn-in video is I had a solid state power amp because there's no point wearing your tubes out for doing speaker break-in. And I had an old iPad and I just searched YouTube for pink noise and found like a 24-hour pink noise video on YouTube and just ran that. I mean, maybe it wasn't completely full range, but it was full enough range that it went down low enough to get the speakers moving and high enough that it did the necessary job. So you can find samples online. You don't need a pink noise generator. You don't need like a modular synth or anything like that. You can just find samples online. Just loop them, leave it playing maybe off an old iPod or something and just come back when you're ready. Here's something about DI boxes. I'm still wondering if I have ground issues in my older house. To my knowledge, a DI box can help with that. Yes, it can. But if I want the tube sound of a microphone preamp for my DI electric guitar, would it make sense to have the DI box and mic preamp together in a chain? Does that make sense? Yes. If specifically you want the sound of the mic preamp, that's how, like, that's how Joe Meek did it in the 60s. He made his own DI boxes, which converted to microphone level, which then went to the preamps. And that was, they did it at that time because that was the only reasonable way, but the proof is in the pudding. It's, and I know as well that, like, David Gilmour did stuff like that quite a lot, to get, like, maybe running into, like, he'd run into a DI box, into a console, into, like, I don't know, an API or Neve channel, into an 1176 compressor, from there on the insert, and then out to an amp. There are millions of ways of doing it. Be aware that this will probably quite greatly increase the noise floor on your channels, but if you're not intending on adding, like, heavy gain after the DI and the mic preamp, that should be fine, because, like, massively increasing the noise floor isn't really apparent unless you put something like a heavy amp sim on afterwards. Seems to have been a resurgence recently in people watching the iPhone audio production video. Something from Douglas Traverso. Could you run through the actual connections, as I didn't quite get it yet? You have the guitar into the interface, which is connected to USB lightning adapter and into the iPhone. Where do you have the battery connected to? Allow me to have a dig through my rucksack and see if I can find all the bits. There we go. So I don't have all the cables with me right this second. I've left the ID4 at home at the moment. Like I said, everything's in boxes with me moving house. This is the missing cable. So this, of course, is one of the, I've got both of the different Apple USB to camera adapters here, the USB 2 and the USB 3 one. I don't know why I carry them both around with me, but I think it's because I've got a convenient pocket in my bag. I just do that. So either of these will plug in to your iPhone, and then this is a Y cable. So you can see how this has got one USB with a little red ring and another one, and then it's got a female on the end. So what you do with this is you get the one with the red ring and you plug that into your power bank. You get the one with no red ring and you plug that into the interface. No, you plug that in here. That's right. And then, so that's plugged into the battery, and then this one then connects to your interface. Lastly, once the battery is connected and your interface powers up, then you connect it. Because the way that USB works, it's got 4 pins inside. 2 of them are for data and 2 of them are for power. So what this is rather cleverly done is it split them so that the power is separate, so we can run that from a battery, and the data goes straight to the iPad, because iPads and iPhones can't deliver enough power to power a full interface. And that's where a lot of people seem to be getting confused as well with using not just Audient, but a lot of different audio interfaces with iPads, that it's the power has to come from somewhere, and the iPad is not strong enough to send power out to them. And that's just a generic thing. iPads and iPhones are not battery banks, and external interfaces need quite a lot of power. A lot of the interfaces that work with iPads you have to plug into the mains, which is not exactly convenient if you're on the road, which is why I do this splitter thing and use an ID4 on a battery bank. Although I don't have to use a battery bank, I could just plug the other end of that into a USB wall charger. That also works. Although you have to be a little bit careful there that you don't get a ground loop hum on that, but that's a different issue. Comment from Richard Naylor on the Sontronic Solo review. If Shaw retired the SM58, it'd be like Gibson retiring the Les Paul. Same issues, same type of user. Well, yeah, but the tide's turning. That Gibson are a good example, actually. And less and less people are buying new Les Pauls. And look at Gibson's financial difficulties. They're looking at going bankrupt soon. That's a big worry. I mean, they're never going to go completely bankrupt. Someone will have to buy them because the name's just too powerful. But it's quite easy to go the way of the dinosaur by not adapting, because that entire generation that bought Les Pauls all have them. And a lot of the generation that bought SM58s have them. It's probably about time for Shure to step up and have a new, like a newly developed mic in that price range that looks like the SM58, maybe even has a similar name like SM58 Mark II. That would sell in droves if it was a better design. As it is, the Beta range is a higher price, and even though it's a better mic, people aren't going to pay it. So, there you go. Question on the RME radar update video. A guy called AdvM, he was having latency issues on his PC with an RME AIO card. Now, this is something that's worth mentioning, that any interface that you use with Reaper especially, although it depends, it's the same with quite a few DAWs, you have to specify in Windows that you're using an ACO driver. In Reaper you can use direct sound, you can use WDM, you can use a few different choices. I think it's the same in Cubase, or it used to be. And not using ACO means not using the drivers designed for low latency. So if you get 100 milliseconds latency, you're probably using the wrong driver. So I advised this chap, and he said to me that he'd gone down from a round trip of 100 milliseconds to 9.6 by choosing the right driver and then getting the sample rate right, the sample buffer size right. So yeah, make sure you're on the right settings, otherwise doing that whole latency thing of trying to record monitor and getting is just gonna be, no. Something on the Neo Creamback from Rich Veek. I was told it is too sterile and clinical, like a typical Neo speaker. I'm wondering if this is a loss in translation, but I was told it is too sterile and clinical. I don't find that at all. This is not the Neo Creamback review that I did, and if anybody's heard that, it doesn't sound sterile and clinical to me at all. The thing about that is that neodymium, or rare earth magnet, is not sterile and clinical. It's just a type of metal. The way that a speaker sounds is dependent on so many things. The type of paper, the way it's broken in, where the ridges are on the outside, and the way that the voice coil's mounted, the number of turns on the voice coil, all sorts of things. I think this impression of neodymium being clinical has come from the fact that a lot of neodymium that we see is in bass cabs, and a lot of the manufacturers that are using Neo are using it on more modern full range speakers, because with less metal on the back of the speaker, they can design it to be cleaner, crisper, more transparent. But that doesn't mean it has to be that way. They've just chosen to use it like that, which then has a knock-on effect that people get prejudiced. And I've used Neo bass cabs before, and they're fantastic. But for guitar, you don't have to use them you don't have to use Neo in the same way. And I think that Celestion have proved that here. So if you've not checked out the Creamback Neo review that I've done, check that out, have a listen. I'm quite sure you won't find that sterile. Last but not least, this one really quite annoyed me. I try not to get annoyed by comments, but one from EmsX did. The constant teen metaler music choices do your channel a disservice. Where do I even begin? First of all, teen metaler, what does that even mean, teen metaler? I've been listening to metal since I was about 4 years old, and I'm now in my 30s. So I was listening to metal before my teens, through my teens, and after my teens. Which part are you talking about? Or do you just not understand metal at all? Are you trying to tell me that metal is bad? That somehow metal is for teens? Because that doesn't hold true. I know thousands, and I'm not exaggerating, thousands of over 20s, over 30s metalheads. I've been to Dream Theater shows, Rush shows, Anthrax, Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, and a lot of the crowd are significantly older than I am. And there are millions of us out there. Millions upon millions upon millions. And how can working in a genre that I like be a disservice to my channel? Because it's run by me, written by me, for me essentially. If you guys like the content that I make, I'm more than happy, but if you don't like it, go and watch somebody else. Because I'm not here to sell out, I'm not here to appeal to the masses. I also play a bit of blues, I also play a bit of acoustic stuff, and they'll come out from time to time, of course they will. And I'll be doing things as I see fit. But if I choose to play metal and cater to a metal audience here, who are you to judge? This is my house, this is what I do, this is my arena. And there are so many people who love this stuff, and that makes me so happy that I'm not going to change for you and your YouTube comment. Sorry. And if anything, I think that's maybe more resolute that I'm going to be doing more heavy, more metal stuff. I'm going to do more tutorials on brutal metal, more stuff on heavy guitar tones, more stuff on heavy bass tones, more stuff on heavy drum tones, more stuff on how to be a successful metal recording artist, because it's so different from any other genre. And again, if you don't like it, tough. I might also do stuff about rock or blues or pop, maybe even, because I work with pop artists as well. But if I do, that's because I want to. And to do your channel a disservice. The channel is a reflection of who I am. The channel is a reflection of what I and we do. So how can metal and a choice of using metal possibly be a disservice? And that's all I've got to say on this matter. And on that bombshell, I think it's time to draw this to a close. I've said my piece now, and that was a bit of a moment for me, but I think it needed saying. So if you guys want to help out and make this channel bigger, more successful, more metal, let us know in the comments. Help us out on the Patreon. Subscribe if you haven't already. We've just hit 5,000 subscribers, and that's just the best feeling. Thank you, everybody, because that means that I've hit what I thought was a ridiculous, unreachable goal. So now I've got to aim for higher and better and start getting more gear in. If you've got any requests for anything you'd like to see me review or any tutorials, again, leave that in the comments, because I need to start scripting out the next lot of videos for everybody. So thanks for watching. I'm Adam Steele for the Hot Pole Studios, and I'll see you in the next video. Good night. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, feel free to check out our other videos, as you can find here, or check out our Facebook and Twitter, or our Patreon page, which helps us to make more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.